Mara Trotter. Today, we'll be talking about why those who suffer with a mental illness wear a mask every single day. Stay tuned for another episode of Win Over Depression. This podcast is dedicated to those of you who suffer with a mental illness and are striving every single day to feel better and to help your family and other friends better understand what you go through. The reason that I like to explain what people who suffer with a mental illness go through is because you would not be able to necessarily identify someone who suffers from depression. When I decided to reveal my diagnosis to my closest friends, they were very surprised, and it was extremely hard for them to believe because they know that I am an upbeat and positive person who is always smiling, encouraging others, pouring words of inspiration into the lives of others, and just being a very outgoing person. But that's what happens is you would never recognize the face of someone who suffers from depression unless they do not wear it well. And the reason that I personally do that is because I don't want to spoil anyone's day or not be involved in what's going on around me. And so that is why I talk about how we have to push ourselves, which is to persevere until something happens for those who suffer with the mental illness, because that describes the epitome of what we do every single day. And it really becomes an exhausting existence. And so that's why sometimes we will just say, no, I just can't push myself today. I will try again in a few hours, or I will give it another try tomorrow. Because the feeling that you have just reminds you that you're just not up to it. And if your mind is speaking loudly to you, it's very difficult to ignore it. So when someone has to depend on pushing themselves every single day, it is really something that other people may not understand. If I were to tell you that getting out of bed is difficult, you may compare that to getting out of bed yourself. And it's very simple. You simply pull the covers back, put one foot on the floor, and then the second foot on the floor. But when you are just feeling like, well, if I get up, what exactly am I going to do? Now, on some days, obviously, if you're working, you know what the plan is. But on other days, you know that you have the ability to say no to yourself and just not move. And then in your mind, you'll keep saying, I'm going to get up in 20 minutes. 20 minutes passes and you've been resting, and now your body doesn't want to move. So another hour passes, 2 hours pass, and then finally you're just saying to yourself, I'm just not going to get up. You're probably hungry. You may even have to use a restroom, but you'll just hold it and get up when it is absolutely necessary because you can no longer hold it. So for you, someone who jumps out of bed as soon as the alarm clock goes off, it's something that comes to you naturally, that you don't even have to think about. But when you have something else on your mind that causes you to always be thinking about how you're going to be feeling and how today is going to affect your life. So what may seem simple and routine to you can be difficult for someone who struggles with a mental illness. In addition to that, there are so many different facets of this disease that this behavior may not be at all what someone that you know experiences. So you would need to really observe that person and figure out if you can tell when they are dealing with symptoms of depression. And I encourage you to do that, because the worst part of depression is not knowing on a day-to-day basis how you're going to be feeling. As we all know, time waits for no one, which means an episode of depression can occur at the most inopportune time. And these episodes render that helplessness and at times really incapacitates the individual. So it doesn't matter if there are things that are pressing that come up, emails that need to be returned, appointments that need to be made, bills that need to be paid. It just doesn't matter. And sometimes it's a major issue, and oftentimes those who suffer with the mental illness have their bills paid automatically so that they are not forced to remember that it is time to pay them. Those individuals who have mental health issues also mask their symptoms because they do not know how their work is going to be affected. And oftentimes they do not trust letting someone else know about their condition for fear that they will be retaliated against. So I really want you to understand that there are so many facets of dealing with a mental health condition, and it can be one of the hardest things that someone has to deal with in their life. So I want you to be more empathetic and don't make assumptions based on stereotypes. Don't make the assumption that someone is simply making up their condition so that they can get attention, and they really aren't feeling the way that they say they are. That is the reason why so many people have committed suicide and their loved ones had absolutely no idea that they were depressed, because they too were able to mask it well. So being depressed is like being in a race for survival. But win over depression encourages you not to focus on surviving, because even though you don't know what to expect day to day, when you are surviving, it is very difficult for you to thrive. And we want you to thrive. So we want you to take the steps that are necessary to keep your symptoms of depression at bay. Be proactive. And we also encourage you to confide in at least one person, two if possible, who can help you manage your depression. No, we're not expecting them to be your counselor or your therapist. Just someone that knows how you're feeling, someone that you can count on to check on you, someone who is not going to judge you, but is going to try their best to not only understand, but to be there when you need them the most. Because oftentimes just being able to speak with someone, or just knowing through a text message that someone is thinking about how you're feeling, that really helps that individual to keep pressing on. This person needs to be select it carefully, and you need to be able to define how and under what circumstances you will seek their help. But you must also do your part. If you are supposed to attend appointments, take medication, or follow instructions that a therapist or counselor may have put in place, you need to be compliant because it is a partnership. It is easy to burn out friends, which may cause them to avoid you when you do not live up to your part of the equation. However, in being transparent, I have to let you know that it really is your own personal fight. It is something that you have to decide to give priority to, because the person who is your accountability coach or partner can only do so much. They can only go so far on your journey. But the real work has to begin and end with you. So whatever it is that you feel that you need in order to move yourself forward in a more positive and constructive direction, you have to do the work to figure that out. And I know that it is and can be a very lonely place to be in. And that is why I've always said that whatever faith you rely on, whatever you believe in, and I believe in God, that is the person that you cry out to in the middle of the night when you can't sleep and you're feeling helpless and you don't want to wake anyone up. That is where you go. And sometimes people ask me, do I ever think that I'll never suffer with the mental illness? And the truth is, I really can't answer that. I would hope to, but what I do know is that I can't stop short of doing my best and reaching my personal and professional goals. And I know that I would be much further along when it comes to achieving my goals if it were not for all of the setbacks that suffering with a mental illness causes. But it really isn't going to do me any good to hope that I wake up tomorrow and I never feel depressed. It's not going to help me to worry about and constantly focus on the deficits. I have to focus on what is positive and what is going to help me get closer to feeling better on a more consistent basis. And again, I want you to know that even though I am further along in my quest to overcome depression than some of you are, and I could be wrong because maybe there are those of you who have completely risen above and you don't currently have any symptoms and you've completely put depression behind you. And if that is you, I salute you because maybe you are trying to help someone else. But I know for me, I'm not there yet, but I am going to get as close to getting there as I possibly can. But I also want you to realize that when you deal with emotional issues, it is hard to not have emotional responses to what happens in your life. And so for us, emotional responses causes us to have a double dose of whatever that response is going to cause us. So if it's going to cause us to lose faith or lose faith in someone else, it's going to hurt twice as much. because we already experience a magnified sense of emotion, and because at times our mind is telling us certain things that are not true, it is very difficult for us to differentiate between what is true and what is reality and what is not reality. And I have experienced just that recently when I had to really deeply question the intentions of someone toward me. And I felt as though I was being left out. And even though the person told me that I was not and that was not the case, it still did not make sense to me. And I'm still kind of struggling with it because of how it made me feel. And so when we are in an episode of depression, how people make us feel or how we feel about certain situations is truly magnified because we are in that place that we're trying our best to get out of. And that is why oftentimes people say that your mind is your worst enemy. And that is true. Because in your mind lies the thoughts and feelings and sometimes the behavior that we experience. And our interpretation of how someone treats us may not be intentional on the person's part, but we see it as being very intentional and take it very personal. And so it's really just tough to manage. It is really tough to manage. But I encourage you to find out who that one person is or two people who you can confide in, who can help you on this journey. And once you find them, make a decision about what the help is going to look like and what are the expectations of one to the other. Because oftentimes when we don't set expectations and a person we feel isn't living up to our expectations, it's because they don't know what they are and they have not agreed to follow them. So that is very important. So the reason that people wear a mask when they suffer from depression is because they don't want people to know how they feel, because they believe that people will judge them or treat them differently or feel as though there is something wrong with them, meaning that they're crazy, they can't handle their problems, they're just not worth being a friend to. All of those types of thoughts enter the mind. So please just show some empathy toward those that suffer with the mental illness and don't make assumptions about their behavior. Ask them, this is what I am getting from your behavior. Is this accurate, or is there something else you want me to know? It really takes high emotional intelligence to really understand someone who deals with a mental illness. So I encourage you to study what emotional intelligence is. Thank you so very much for listening to this podcast about why those who suffer with depression wear a mask every single day. And I never want to end my podcast without thanking you so very much for listening. I am continuing to grow and enter more and more markets, both domestic and international. If you would like to support this podcast, I could really use your help. Would you please go to www.patreon, that's patreon.com/Tamara Trotter, TAMERA, last name TROTTER. As little as $10 to $15 per month will really help us to reach more individuals to talk to them about the importance of staying in the game of life and not wanting to commit suicide. You can also find us on Pinterest at TT Mental Health Expert. Please consider joining our Facebook group, also called Win Over Depression. As you know, we have a YouTube channel called Win Over Depression, as well as we can be found on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Remember, giving up is never an option. You must stay in the game of life. And if you are trying to better understand someone who suffers with a mental illness, I encourage you to go to my website, www.winoverdepression.org. I have been giving lots of homework in many of my episodes, and today's episode is number 83. Win Over Depression now has a journal where you can keep all of your information, and it is also filled with many of the affirmations that you have found while listening to my podcast. If you go to winoverdepression.org and click on products, you will be able to see many of the products that we offer, and you would really help to expand this channel by making a purchase. So today's homework is, I'd like for you to write down at least 2 people that you are going to approach to ask them to be your accountability partner. Before you present this idea to them, I encourage you to write down what your expectations of them would be and allow them to tell you what they are willing to do as your accountability coach. In addition to that, I'd like for you to also write down, when do you feel that you wear a mask the most? Is it in your personal or professional life? And I want you to think about why that is. Are you someone who does not want your family to know that you suffer with a mental illness, and therefore you wear a mask in your personal life? Or are you someone that does not want your work or your job to know that you suffer with a mental illness, and that is why you wear a mask in your professional life? You may be someone who wears a mask both professionally and personally. And the reason I am asking this of you is because the more people that are willing to share their experience living with a mental illness, the more people will better understand about depression, but also get to know you better, and your story may help them. Your story may encourage them to share that they have their own struggle. The more that we are able to share how we feel emotionally, the more that we will be able to heal on our journey to feeling better, to decreasing the number of suicides in this country, and also decreasing our episodes of depression. Take care, my friend. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next Friday. Remember, Win Over Depression drops a new episode every Friday. I will see you then. Take care, and remember, your life is worth living, and things will get better. Take care, my friends.